Careful. This is the moment when the supposedly dead killer comes back to life for one last scare.
Hello everybody! As we enter spooky season and Halloween is here, you know it wouldn't be right not to make any horror movie content. As a horror movie fan, I have my fair share of favorite franchises, films, and characters. With horror characters comes the final girl trope, and over the years, the final girl has really evolved. Today, I will be explaining the final girl trope and the impact of this character introduction, and also ranking some of my favorites. So let's get into it. So if you don't know what the final girl trope is, it is usually the female protagonist or main character of the horror film that is the final one to survive and defeat the antagonist or the villain. It's pretty self-explanatory in the title, and some famous names you might know are Laurie Strode from all of the Halloweens, Sally Hardesty from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies, Sidney Prescott from all of the Screams, and there's a lot more to name. If we look back into horror cinema history, the female characters were portrayed as promiscuous, ditzy, helpless, and pretty much useless. There weren't a lot of strong female leads or protagonists that really took on the villain. With the introduction of the final girl, we got to see more powerful female leads in horror films, and it really introduced a new culture for cinema. The final girl, representing the badass and last surviving female lead in a horror film, has become popularized as a new trope and common horror convention. The female characters never gave me any hope at all because none of them had seemed to have any survival instincts or relatable traits, or their characters. But the final girl has evolved so much, and in more recent horror movies, they became some real badasses that show that they are not to be effed with. So let's not waste any more time and get into my rank of final girls. Maxine from X, released in 2022, was one of our more recent final girls, and she actually has more movies coming out about her story. And you guys have probably seen the franchise Pearl and X, and there's going to be a third one, Maxine. She is last on my rank because she had some pretty oblivious moments where she could have been smarter and saved the situation, but she definitely redeemed herself in the end. Mind you, the setting of X is set in the 70s or 80s, and I guess that makes sense why some of the characters are so oblivious. She definitely knows how to handle herself and any situation she gets into, including the end where she made sure to finish off the villain. Because why do they never ever make sure they are unalive before they leave? You have to make sure they're never gonna come back. Also, props to Mia Goth for playing both roles incredibly. She played the old woman and Maxine herself. Props to the makeup crew that did an amazing job as well. I mean, look at this. Dani from Midsommar in 2019 was a pretty unique final girl. She is considered the final girl because she was crowned May Queen and gave in to join their little cult. Although she didn't get to save her friends, being the final girl was representative of something more. Her ending was more symbolic of a weight being lifted off her shoulders because she had suppressed a lot of emotional baggage for so long, and the fact that her friends and her boyfriend were not being supportive of her grieving process definitely made the ending more powerful for her. She felt like she finally had a new community that allowed her to grieve and confront her emotions. Gale from Scream is one of my favorite final girls for sure. She is so obnoxious and cocky and full of herself, but one thing about her is that she always gets what she wants when she goes after it. She's one of those characters you have to grow to love over the years. In the later films, she becomes a staple in the franchise and grows a lot closer to Sidney, always having her back because you guys know they were not on good terms in the very first movie. She definitely is that best friend that will always have your back. I loved her and Dewey together because he also carried the franchise on his back since the first movie as well. Sidney is the ultimate it girl. She is one of the first people you think of when you hear final girl. She really grew a pair after the third movie because I think she was sick of people messing with her every damn year. You can see how strong she gets mentally and physically by the way she fights off Ghostface. I think she probably took some fighting classes or something like that. Over the years, she becomes prepared and she doesn't leave anywhere without being armed, and she's smart for that. The worst part about being Sidney though is that a new villain comes up every year and it could be literally anyone. You don't know if they're close to you or a random stranger or a freaky fan. That's the rough part because this story had become a franchise within the franchise, if you know what I mean. So these Ghostface fans could just pick up a mask and start chasing Sidney one of these days because they felt like it. And you don't know how crazy these Ghostface fanatics are. Laurie Strode is another notable final girl that everyone thinks of because of how many decades she has been fighting the same man, and yet she continues to win every single time. I know Michael is persistent, but he should eventually give up because Laurie got it. She wasn't that smart in 1978, but hey, she still survived. And decades later, she's never given up a fight. In Halloween Ends, which was kind of disappointing, Laurie finally puts Michael to rest and he basically gives up because his body was giving out. But she had never ran from a fight and she always kept herself armed. And her whole house was basically a Kevin McAllister trap times 10. She already knew that he was coming, so she was prepared. Some honorable mentions that I want to include, and these are girls that are going to be above the rank from the girls that I just listed. Ellen Ripley from the Alien film series is an honorable mention because she is one of the sharpest, most skilled final girls on this list. I would definitely put her above the final girls I just listed because she demonstrates independence and she doesn't show any vulnerability or weakness like the stereotypical final girl. It didn't seem like she had character development, it just seemed like she was straight up badass from the beginning. She's definitely a natural born leader in the way she dominates the room, even in a space full of men. She has really good instincts and knows how to remain calm and composed in a sticky situation. Adelaide from Us is another great final girl, but I don't know if you'll consider her a final girl knowing the end of the movie. Anyways, let's just talk about how strong, protective, and smart she was when dealing with the villains. Her whole family is actually really smart, and they managed to outsmart the tethered people, but Adelaide definitely shows characteristics of protective maternal instincts and just badass in general. Kirby from Scream 4, where she was introduced, is an honorable mention because not a lot of people really think of her when you hear Final Girl. The fact that she managed to survive and come back in the 6th movie was amazing and was highly requested by fans. She was the sole survivor of the 4th movie besides Gale and Sidney, but she becomes an important character and a fan favorite of the franchise. Kirby is a cop in Scream 6 and definitely possesses sharp and quick skills, along with a strong personality that defies a lot of stereotypes that are put on the side character. She proves that she's badass enough to come back and be more than just a blonde airhead. Erin from You're Next is one of the most underrated and best final girls in my opinion. She's number 1 on my list because, let me just get into it. The reason why we don't talk about her enough is because most final girls get decades worth of franchise films and they get to maintain their final girl crowns by proving it in multiple films. However, Erin only had one chance, one movie to prove that she was that girl. If you guys haven't seen You're Next, then you need to watch it now. Erin is one of the smartest, most intuitive final girls you'll ever see that carried that whole family on her back to try and help them survive. She has a background in survival because her father raised her on a survivalist compound, and that's where she picked up all of those skills. She took down 3 of the masked villains herself, and she set up traps everywhere in the house and dodged every shot they took. She even outsmarts the villain when they were chasing her by fooling them into believing that she ran outside in the woods, when in reality she was really back in the house. 100%, Erin doesn't receive her flowers or her final girl crown enough. She deserves more recognition because she was smart from the beginning. She went straight into survival mode. She didn't waste time by crying or showing any weakness. So Erin reminds me of Kevin McAllister but grown and 10 times more intense. She's the ultimate badass final girl, and she deserves the title as one of the best horror movie characters for sure. So there you guys have it. That is my list of favorite final girls, and I know I might be missing some, so that's why I have you guys to comment down below some of your favorite final girls. Actually, just let me know what are your favorite horror movies, franchises, or characters in general. I'd love to hear them so we can discuss in the comments. And that's all for today, and I thank you all for watching, so I will see you all next time.